All right, Jonathan Rickert, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to see you again.
Yeah, man. Dude, it's been great, man, for working with you. Just for context for the listeners, we met January 2025, so about a year ago in Sedona. I was in town, and you reached out in the past wanting to have an OligoScan done. We met, we talked for like 3 hours, and fast forward today, we've created a product to help people detox aluminum, and we're in full force, man.
Yeah,
It's
it's fun. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a journey, and we'll talk about aluminum export probably at some point in this interview. But dude, I really want to just talk to you about your wealth of knowledge in this space. We've done like two trade shows together now, and I have my spiel. I help people identify the root cause with the OligoScan. I help shine light into some of these deficiencies and toxicities and how they're related. But you bring like this whole other perspective to the game, and you're really good at explaining how these functions and systems work in the body and how it applies to not only OligoScan tests, but blood tests. So my first question for you is let's talk about your approach, the bioenergetic approach. What is it? And maybe like how did you find that approach and what makes it different?
Sure. Well, hey, thanks. Right back at you, Jeff. I mean, I've learned a lot from you, and every time we do a trade show or we develop something together, it's like, whoa, it's a whole new area to explore and to drill down into. I think why we're so synergistic is because I kind of bring a different viewpoint to the table, and that is the bioenergetics approach. And so essentially what that is an ATP-centric systems-based model of health. Okay, so if you were to create sort of a mind map in your head of what that would look like, at the center of that mind map would be ATP production,
Yeah.
maximizing ATP production. And so everything that's connected to that is either going to support that or inhibit that. Okay.
Right. Right.
And so, and I think that, going to these trade shows like A4M and Cellcore recently, and just, talking to practitioners and hearing what's going on in the functional medicine space and alternative health space. So essentially, everyone is trying to optimize for that.
Yeah.
Where the disagreements are is how. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And and so some areas, especially in the functional medicine area, a lot of the education that comes from supplement companies and testing companies. And so there's a heavy bias in what they're teaching. I
Yeah.
mean, they're teaching things that are going to support the sales of those things. And many of them are useful. And I think, needs to be contextualized inside of the frame of an energy centric model of health.
Yeah.
And that is not simply optimizing mitochondrial function. That is a big piece of it,
Yeah.
but is every step from every environmental input, light and food, leading all the way to the output of ATP production, activated ATP.
Yeah.
And so that's like a very big frame, and there's many steps in that process. Um, at the end of all that is mitochondrial function.
Right.
So pretty much everybody agrees that mitochondrial function or dysfunction is core to almost all chronic disease. And and when we start to frame these different supplements and testing methods inside that frame, now it's a lot easier to get clear, specific outcomes for patients. So that's kind of what I bring to the table.
Yeah.
Um, it you know so yeah, so guide me from there because I could go
Yeah.
many different directions.
Well, I mean, like what I go through today is, you talk to people, everybody, low carb, high carb, carnivore, keto. Uh, Everybody likes to fall in these buckets, and we think that like this is the right way or this is the wrong way, and people's opinions are changing based on experience. Um, what does the bioenergetic approach tell you? Is it carnivore? Is it keto? Is it balance? Is it both? Like, talk about that. I mean,
Yeah, well,
and before you talk about that, like you're before I met you, before we started working together and really just like starting to experiment with the formula for aluminum export, you were one of the ones that kind of shined this light into carbohydrates are not the devil. You need carbohydrates. So before I met you, I wasn't really on that train. I was more carnivore and not eating a lot of carbs. So yeah, just talk to me about like that.
Yeah, so bioenergetics is not one person. It's sort of a lineage on this perspective. There's many people that have evolved this sort of methodology. And, starting way back with Albert St. Georgi in the early 1900s and Gilbert Ling and Ray Peat, and there's a number of other figures that have sort of contributed to this.
Yeah.
And and so the other thing I'll say, sort of a preface, is that um, dietary setup, calories and macronutrient profiling is not something that's typically done in a functional medicine setting. It's usually a focus on micronutrients and toxins and gut health, all of which are important. But the big inputs to the body and biological response to the environment are light and food.
Yeah.
And so you can get really far by just adjusting those things into sort of like a natural, like the way that nature would have
Right.
designed it. So okay, so to get to specific to your question about diet, right?
Yeah.
Um, Many people, when I consult with one-on-one with clients, I
Yeah.
get a lot of people that come from a carnivore background.
Yeah.
And so usually the trajectory is like, okay, my gut is all screwed up. I have either heartburn, indigestion, constipation, diarrhea, and I've figured out that there are foods that I cannot tolerate, and most of those foods are plant-based. And so if I eliminate all the plants, my gut function gets better, and therefore I feel better.
Right.
Okay, and that's why carnivore is a win.
Yeah.
But carnivore really is a short-term strategy. It should be a short-term strategy because
Yeah.
what inevitably happens is that someone only stays carnivore, say 6 to 12 months, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And then what they experience is lowered libido, lowered sex hormone production,
Yeah.
disrupted sleep.
Yeah.
And then you go, well, why is that happening? And that's happening because of the lack of carbohydrates.
Right.
And so with the lack of carbohydrates, now you've got an increase in stress hormones. And so there is stress hormones are basically mitigated by carbohydrates. And so cortisol specifically, but not just cortisol. We talk mostly about cortisol. So when I say stress hormones and cortisol, I'm kind of using them interchangeably. Of
Yeah.
course, adrenaline, noradrenaline, glucagon, this is all part of the same sort of cluster of stress hormones. These things are going to wax and wane depending on blood sugar levels.
Yeah.
And so the major function, the primary function of cortisol is to stabilize blood sugar. And that is a very, very important function. We need that function. And of course, we need all these stress hormones.
Yeah.
We are just maladapted
Right.
to their expression in the body because what we've done through sort of modern society is put more pressure on that system. And so they're chronically elevated. And then we have even more things layered on top of that. So, psychologically speaking, people generally are overbooked and over busy, trying
Yeah.
to do too much,
Yeah.
and then on top of that, they may be working out too much.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they hear some health influencers that talk about being low carb because blood sugar and diabetes. They just kind of like throw that out there without understanding the underlying mechanics.
Yeah.
And and so, and you kind of layer all those things on top of one another, and now you've got chronically high expressed cortisol and stress hormones. And that is directly going to downregulate sex hormone production and disrupt sleep and disrupt the gut and all these other things.
Yeah.
And so carnivore can be very useful as a short-term intervention
Yeah.
to take pressure off the gut.
Yeah.
And many people misattribute the benefits of carnivore to eating more animal products as and so it's misattributed because the benefit is usually the removal of the plant products,
Right.
specifically fibers.
Right.
And so then you go, well, why would the fiber be bad? I'm told fiber is really good for me.
Yeah.
And yes, fiber is good if you have optimal gut function.
Right.
But if you have dysbiosis or SIBO, or you have poor digestion, then fiber will feed the pathogenic bacteria.
Yeah.
And so this is where this is the point where it's like, okay, well, yes, we don't want the overgrowth of these pathologicals in the gut. We need the right architecture. We predominantly need them all in the colon and the large intestine, not in the small intestine. And so we need to optimize gut function. We need to optimize digestive function, so stomach acid, bile production, enzyme production, so
Yeah.
that the foods that we are eating can then be assimilated in the small intestine, which should be predominantly like mostly sterile. It's not going to be completely sterile, but you don't want your microbiome there.
Yeah.
You want it to be in the colon. And then by the time the fiber does get to the colon, that soluble fiber that is being fermented by our beneficial bacteria are not being fermented by these pathologicals.
Yeah.
And so the thing that people usually feel bad from when they're eating all the plants, um, aside from specific sensitivities they may have, like immunological sensitivities, is usually the gut throwing off too much lipopolysaccharide, or LPS for short.
Yeah.
And so this is basically just the outer shell of gram-negative bacteria, and this directly shuts down the mitochondria. So this is why people feel bad, is if you get too much of these gram negatives and you just feed them indiscriminately with fiber, you'll get that overgrowth. And so if you remove the fiber, then they feel better. So the answer isn't to remove the fiber, now you're done, because you do
Yeah.
need carbohydrate to prevent this excess stress hormone production.
Yeah.
So now you have to remediate the gut with very specific things. So I have a method for doing that, but that's sort of the basic thing.
Yeah.
And everyone agrees that elevated cortisol and stress hormones are very pro-aging and they're highly catabolic. And so what we don't want to zero them out. We need them. We just need them flowing in the proper circadian rhythm with cortisol specifically.
Yeah.
And we need to keep them in their Goldilocks zone. You know,
Yeah.
we don't want to be pushing them out like above that zone. And because we know all the downstream effects of cortisol and what that will do negatively.
Yeah. So it's really about the order of operations. It's like carnivore can be absolutely beneficial, but it's not going to be like, it's not like everybody should start with carnivore diet. It's like, it really depends on some of the metrics and symptoms that somebody's going through and experiencing.
Yeah, and the best way to do that is to do it. You don't need to run a gut test to do this. You could just ask about gut function. How
Yeah.
many bowel movements are you having a day? Is it two or three, which would be optimal? Is it once every couple of days? That's not optimal.
Yeah.
What is the form? Is this very loose?
Yeah.
Or is this like, are we getting pebbles here that is like borderline,
Yeah.
constipation? The Bristol stool chart is like a really basic way to identify, stool shape and size. Like, are you kind of right in the middle that's like looking like a snake,
Yeah.
two, three times a day? That's pretty good. Like, if
Yeah.
you're there, you probably have minimal disruption in your gut. Do you get gas or bloating after eating, and how soon? Does
Yeah.
it happen a couple of hours? Then there's some kind of a SIBO or SIFO type of thing going on.
Yeah.
Or does that happen 6, 8 hours after eating? Um,
Yeah.
and so just by asking these questions, you can kind of figure out where the problem might be,
Yeah.
and how well the gut is actually working. And so that would determine then how someone introduces, if you're a carnivore, how you would reintroduce carbohydrates, which ones,
Yeah.
and where someone is on that continuum. So like if someone's coming from carnivore and they stopped because they had this gut dysfunction, generally speaking, and by the way, I'll just say that like the carbohydrate piece, getting that getting the right amounts, eating the right ones is the trickiest piece outside, of the three macronutrients.
Yeah.
And we can
Yeah.
talk about fats and proteins later because the balance of fat and carbohydrate is a really important thing that needs to be dialed in as well. But, generally speaking, I aim for something like zero point 0.7, zero point 0.8 grams per pound
Yeah.
of protein. If someone is not obese, if they
Yeah.
are obese, you're aiming for, target weight.
Yeah.
And so then you break that up over 3 meals a day or
Yeah.
4 meals a day. Then from there, you would generally go twice that amount in carbohydrate. So let's say you're eating 100 grams of protein a day, split over 3 meals, you're going to aim for 200 grams of carbohydrate. And this might sound crazy. So if someone's listening to this, like we're going to talk about why this is
Yeah.
the basic setup. But that's a good general rule because that is usually the minimum amount someone would need to prevent gluconeogenesis from occurring. And so gluconeogenesis is simply the process whereby your body will break down protein, whether it is your own protein in your smooth and skeletal muscle, and
Right.
create sugar with that,
Right.
glucose, or the protein that you're eating, okay?
Yeah.
Or some combination of both. And so that 2-to-1 ratio of carb to protein is the minimal amount someone would need to prevent excess gluconeogenesis. And gluconeogenesis is triggered by cortisol and
Yeah.
stress hormones. And that's why. Okay. So
Yep.
again, we're back to like cortisol, big picture here.
Yeah.
Um, and so then you go, okay, well, how do I figure out what carbohydrate to eat if if I do have gut dysfunction?
Yeah.
Well, outside of doing things specifically for the gut, most people tolerate simple sugars better than they tolerate complex
Hmm.
carbohydrates. So simple sugars better than starches.
Right.
So examples of simple sugar that are natural, clean are fruit juices, dried fruit, maple syrup, honey, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's sort of like the Paul Saladino approach is like,
Right.
right, eating like animal based and getting carbohydrate from those sources.
Right.
And generally, people do better with that. And if your gut is more disrupted, you're going to want to go for the fiberless, simple sugars. That would be the fruit juice that has got no pulp in it, and honey, maple syrup, that
Right.
kind of thing.
Right.
Okay. There generally is more problems with people eating starches. So
Yeah.
when I say that, I'm talking about roots and tubers and
Yeah.
squashes and grains.
Yeah.
Um, but uh, what I find for we'll go like, I don't know how to state this exactly, but like moderately disrupted guts, people can do some of those starches. They generally will tolerate the roots and the tubers better, the
Yeah.
squashes better than they will grains. And some people just eliminate grains altogether,
Right.
but some people do okay with white rice and with like sourdough bread, fermented,
Yeah.
you know, einkorn, for example, low gluten style breads,
Yeah.
and they can tolerate that just fine. So, like in my household, for example, that's kind of what we're eating. Where it's sourdough bread, or it's rice, or it's lots of roots and tubers and squashes and stuff. And
Yeah.
those are better because they are more nutritionally dense as well. So you get a
Right.
lot more potassium from the potatoes and the yams and the squashes than you do from grains. And
Yeah.
so if you're going to be eating starches, you might as be eating the more micronutrient dense ones, especially the ones with more potassium, because as you know, potassium demands are very high for humans, and most people are just not getting enough of that.
Do you like for all the people that are super into health and wellness and like to work out, do you do the Noah Ryan fruit maxing in the morning, fruit juices in the morning, have your workout like more so on an empty, not empty stomach, but like not a lot of like rice before you work out? And do you shift that like the starches more towards later in the day after you work out?
Personally, I don't do that. Well, so like first of all, like I think you should be working out generally on an empty stomach. Like you don't want to be
Yeah.
digesting food. You don't
Right.
want to eat a big meal and then go work out. Like
Right.
you need
Exactly.
to, uh, energy needs to be spent doing that,
Yep.
right? Digestion or working out. However, providing sugar in easily digested, absorbed form, like juice or
Yeah.
honey or something like that, prior to and during your workout is actually a great idea
Yeah. Totally.
because especially if and say when we got to define working out here. So,
Yeah.
there is a difference between lifting and running.
Yeah.
If you're going to go run 6 miles compared to say lifting, I mean, when you are lifting, you will have a noticeable difference because what you're using when you are lifting weight is predominantly sugar. You're using glycogen storage in the skeletal muscle, which
Yeah.
is basically stored sugar.
Yeah.
And so you want to replace that while you are lifting if you want to maximize your lift.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's beneficial to do that. I think where his idea comes from is, Anabology's honey diet that he published a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And what he was essentially trying to do was actually maximize two processes. One is FGF, and the other one is the Randle cycle.
Uh-huh.
And so the FGF phenomenon is essentially separating the basically you are restricting protein
Right.
during the day,
Yeah.
and that restriction upregulates FGF, which will increase metabolic rate.
What's
However,
FGF?
fibroblast growth factor,
Okay.
and so it's been demonstrated in rats, and then many people anecdotally have been using this method to
Yeah.
increase their basically get leaner.
Yeah.
And it does work. However, it is a stress mediated response. And so, from the bioenergetics viewpoint, it's not something that you would want to do. It's just unnecessary, and it's not because of the stress hormones, and it's not something that you would want to do on the regular. Um, the other process that is important is the Randle cycle. And so this gets into the sort of fat carbohydrate uh, amounts that you would eat. However, bioenergetics does not. Um, okay, so let me back up a
Yeah.
second and describe what the Randle cycle is.
Yeah.
So the Randle cycle is essentially a metabolic fuel switch for the mitochondria. It was identified in 1963 by Dr. Randall, and what it essentially says is that when your serum levels of fatty acids rise above a threshold, and there is a little wiggle room here, your threshold is going to be a little different than mine or somebody else. When that fatty acids in your blood rise above that level, it's going to signal to the mitochondria, burn fat,
Right.
not sugar.
Yep.
Okay. So it can only burn one substrate at a time. And now this is happening at a systems level. We got trillions of mitochondria. But basically, if you have a high fat diet, then you will not be able to properly oxidize that sugar.
Yeah.
Okay. And so this is why a lot of people have metabolic dysfunction. They don't have this another twist in the zeitgeist of alternative health. People don't have a problem burning sugar, or excuse me, burning fat. They have a problem burning sugar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so this term metabolic flexibility is the true definition of that, the dysfunction that people have is that they are burning fat too often and not able to burn the sugar. So now they have elevated blood sugar.
Right.
Okay. And so as a result of that elevated blood sugar, they have elevated insulin because
Right.
now the body's trying to force the sugar into the cell, but it can't, the cell won't take it up because it's not burning sugar, it's burning fat because of these elevated serum fatty acids.
Right.
And so that, then it's going to try to basically store that excess sugar as glycogen, which you want in the liver and the skeletal muscle. But then after that, now you start to develop fat.
Yeah.
And so that is where the sort of that's the major lever in resolving, metabolic syndrome is the fat carbohydrate ratio in someone's diet over the course of a day. Okay, so the course of your eating window during the day. And we don't do shortened eating windows. Like if you are metabolically fit, if you have a good metabolic rate, a rate of ATP production, you will be hungry soon after you wake up.
Yeah.
It's not a flex
Yeah.
to not be hungry until noon if you wake
Yeah.
up at 7. That is not a flex at all. That is
Yeah.
a signal of depressed metabolic rate and lowered ATP production.
Yeah.
And so appetite and hunger is a very strong signal of a good metabolic rate.
Yep.
And so waking up and eating fruit till noon is not a it's not a bad strategy at all, as long as you are getting all of the macronutrients you need in that total eating window before you go to sleep.
Yeah.
So the way that I frame it, which is just easier for everybody, is to take your total protein and your total carbohydrate and your total fat and just divide that up over 3 meals.
Yeah.
It's essentially the same thing, but you're just front loading the protein and the fat with the carbohydrate. There's a misconception that the Randle cycle is triggered if you eat fat and carbohydrates together, and that's not
Yeah.
true. It's happening over the course of the day.
Okay.
Okay. So that
Okay,
kind
so
of,
it's not okay. There's so many things I wanted to ask you about this, but so it's not like you shouldn't have high fat, high carb meals together.
well, we got to define this. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a construct for figuring out how much protein to eat in a day, and we have a basic construct for figuring out how much carbohydrate to eat in a day.
Yeah.
So then you go, okay, well, how much fat? So if someone has insulin resistance, they're pre-diabetic, which is a lot of people that I see,
Yeah.
a
Me
lot of
too.
people have this, then I usually start men at 50 grams of fat
Yeah.
for the whole day and
Yeah.
women at 40 grams. Going too much below that number will actually have a negative outcome for sex hormones.
Yeah. I mean, that's not a
And
lot.
it's not a lot. And if you're eating real food, then it becomes even more difficult
Yeah.
because most protein is packaged with a fair amount of fat.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, like, this means that you're going to be more mindful about eating that ribeye,
Yeah.
or because the ribeye is like
Yeah.
60% fat,
Yeah.
and you would want to be eating a lot more low fat animal sources. So when you're eating, like, ground beef is a
Yeah.
great source of protein,
Yeah.
and zinc and other things. You're going to be eating like a leaner, like a 90% instead of an
Yeah.
85%.
Yeah.
When you're taking dairy, which is an excellent food, and we've had a couple of interactions I think are worth talking about around dairy usage, and a
Yeah.
lot of practitioners having their patients avoid it. Uh, you're gonna go for skim or low fat milk,
Yep.
like a skim or a 2%, and then when you're eating, say, yogurt, it's going to be low fat. So the dairy fat would be low. And if you think about it, actually, ancestrally, this is what farmers did, is once they milked a cow, they skimmed all the fat off,
Yeah.
they drank the skim milk,
Yeah.
and they used the fat to make butter
Cheese.
or
Yeah.
cheese or
Yeah.
whatever else.
Yep.
And so those things were eaten in lower amounts.
Right. Yeah.
Um, So that's my benchmark for starting someone. Now, the more metabolically fit a person is, like, you're very different because you're very fit. You're probably the healthiest man I know. And
Thanks.
and
Appreciate
so
it.
yeah, well, you know how to take care of yourself. And
Yeah.
so you can afford to eat large amounts of fat without it causing insulin resistance. The
Right.
other thing that you have going for you that most people don't is that you have a very low polyunsaturated fat diet. So this
Yeah.
is the other piece of your designing your fat intake, is that you want to minimize the amount of especially omega-6 polyunsaturated fat in your diet. And so this is where the seed oil thing comes in,
Yeah.
right? Is like seed oils are highly concentrated in omega-6, particularly linoleic acid.
Yeah.
And And so it's available in all types of fat. So even the highest sources of saturated fat have a little bit of polyunsaturated fat. So
Right.
sometimes I get the argument back, oh, well, they're essential. It's like, yeah, no, there's no way if you're eating real food to eliminate polyunsaturated fat from your diet. There's no
Right.
way.
Yeah.
If you're drinking low fat milk, you're getting some polyunsaturated fat. If you're eating red meat, you're getting some amount. If you're using coconut oil, which is the most concentrated form of saturated fat, you're getting some polyunsaturated fat in there. The problem is that almost all prepared foods and packaged convenience foods are made with high polyunsaturated
Yeah.
fats. So, what a lot of people find surprising is that they understand canola oil is bad.
Yeah.
Canola oil is 27-30% omega-6,
Yeah.
but sunflower oil is like 70%.
Wow.
And organic sunflower oil is what's put in a lot of the organic packaged products. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's organic. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, well, you haven't changed the fat profile. In fact, you've increased it. You haven't removed that. So that's been the big issue, is that it's just pervasive in the prepared. So we're talking restaurant food, right? We're talking like even you go to Whole
Yeah.
Foods and you see that in the prepared food bar, and a lot of the organic packaged products that parents are buying for their kids
Yeah.
are laden with organic sunflower or
Yeah.
safflower oil, which is the equivalent amount.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so if you can construct it that way, and you go, okay, well, that makes sense conceptually, but how do I like logistically do that? And that's where you and I
Yeah.
agree. Chronometer is an excellent tool for this,
Yeah.
for both macronutrient and micronutrient profiling.
Right. And obviously the low-hanging fruit is like stop buying processed food and canola oil, stop eating at restaurants that cook in canola oil, or like tell them you're allergic to canola oil, you can't use this oil. The low-hanging fruit is like not using the oil that's used in abundance to cook the food. It's you're gonna get some from chicken skin, you're gonna get some from egg yolks. Obviously, you want to make better choices to choose farms that are not feeding their chickens corn and soy. So, I mean, the low-hanging fruit is to eliminate the oil that you're cooking it with. Some of these foods you're going to have some sources. Okay, I want to go back to two things because I want to try to make this as applicable as possible for the audience. Number one, some because I hear this a lot with women. A lot of women like don't poop for 2 days, 2, 3 days. What could, and obviously there's a lot of factors here, but like if a woman is only pooping like one time every 2 or 3 days and they're like little rabbit scat, what could that mean? What could that mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, almost certainly that is hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
And so this is how the thyroid ties into this whole process of end-to-end, energy production. Is you can think of thyroid as the accelerator on the mitochondria. Okay? So
Yep.
if the car is our analogy here, pushing down the accelerator in the car is the amount of thyroid, active thyroid, T3, that
Yeah.
is causing the mitochondria to upregulate ATP production. And a lot of women are hypothyroid to some
Yeah.
degree or another.
Right.
And the easiest way to identify this is just by taking your morning body temperature when you wake up. And if you wake up and your body temperature is under 98 degrees,
Yeah.
then you're hypothyroid. And the
Yep.
amount of degrees lower is the degree of severity.
Yep.
And then after you eat your first meal, which is ideally a balanced uh, protein, carbohydrate, fat, according to this rubric that I laid out before,
Right.
your body temperature should rise at that point to 98.6 degrees.
Right.
And so, like if we zoom out for a second and we look at um, this metabolic dysfunction that's occurred over time, humans are now, at least in modern countries in the United States, 1 to 2 degrees colder than they were in the 1950s.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't know
Okay,
that.
so
Yeah.
where's that heat coming from? It's coming from the mitochondria.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
this is a proxy for ATP production.
Right.
Um,
Right.
so, there's that temperature, and then we have the massive increase in obesity, which is another effect of metabolic depression. Okay. People are not fat because they are, overeating calories. They're fat because they have they have metabolic dysfunction. They have a slow rate of ATP production.
Yeah.
And
So,
it,
so, oh, good.
and
So,
one more thing
yeah.
here that is also more evidence for this, large scale metabolic depression that we have is that there is a famous study that was done called the Minnesota Starvation Experiment.
Uh-huh.
And there was a lot of really interesting things that came out of that. But what they did was they looked at 36 conscientious objectors to World War II that basically offered their body for science.
Yeah.
And Ansel Keys famously ran this study. And basically, these 36 guys that came in were roughly 150 pounds, 10% body fat, and they were eating 3,500 calories a day to maintain that weight.
Wow.
How
Wow.
many people do you know now that are eating 3,500 calories a day that are 10% body fat and they are relatively sedentary?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
not people working out. These guys were like, professors at universities that are sitting around doing math
yeah.
equations and stuff like this.
Wow.
They're not working out.
Right.
At most they're biking and walking. That's all they're doing.
Right.
So here's another piece of data that shows how much the metabolic slowdown is.
Yeah. Wow. It's incredible. So when let's say this woman is hypothyroid and she's not overweight. She's like almost like skinny, normal weight. What's the root cause of that? Is it iodine deficiency? Is it selenium deficiency? Is it what usually could be the root cause for the overabundance of the hypothyroidism?
Um, yeah, it's probably multifactorial,
Yeah.
honestly. That what you mentioned is part of it. I think selenium is deficiency is more important in addressing in hypothyroidism than iodine deficiency.
Yeah.
Uh, and the reason is that most of the issue that women, but all people have, is with the conversion of T4 to T3.
Yeah.
And the conversion of the storage form of thyroid, which is the 80% of what your thyroid makes is T4
Yeah.
and 20% is T3. So only 20% of the active form is made by the thyroid.
Right.
The difference, most of the difference is the conversion at the liver.
Yeah.
So, and that is a selenium dependent conversion, pulling off one of those iodine in the deiodinase enzymes
Yeah.
is they're pulling an iodine off to make T3. That's selenium dependent. But there's other factors. If someone's not eating enough carbohydrate,
Yeah.
because this thyroid system is essentially sensing environmental signals,
Yeah.
and it's not going to upregulate in a scarcity environment.
Yeah.
And the biggest signal outside of light, the biggest signal with regard to food for abundance or scarcity is the amount of carbohydrate that a person is consuming.
Yeah.
Okay. So the worst thing a woman could do who has this situation where they have low bowel movements is to go low carb.
Yeah.
Okay. So now they've upregulated these stress hormones, which will then further contribute to inhibition of the thyroid conversion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a really simplistic way to think about this is like you have a balance, right? And on one of the scales, one of the side of the scale, you have thyroid hormone. And the
Yeah.
other side of the scale, you've got cortisol. Okay. And metabolic rate is sort of a function of how these two things are balancing against one another.
Yeah.
And so this is why thinking about how someone is increasing or decreasing their cortisol, as well as how they're increasing or they're creating the environment for the increase or decrease of the thyroid hormone, which are basically the brake and the gas pedal on the mitochondria. Now, initially, in a stress response, healthy adaptive stress response when you need to perform a very like, ancestrally it's time to go kill an animal,
Yeah.
right? And you like have to sprint and you maybe have to
Right.
chase for a while. That upregulated stress hormone is is a healthy adaptation.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you are doing it by removing carbohydrates, that's a very maladapted, situation to increasing stress hormones. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
So, okay. So you've got these things, you've got the micronutrients that you mentioned,
Yep.
and then you've got the carbohydrate background. And then the other big depressor of thyroid conversion is estrogen dominance.
Yeah.
So I wonder, since you've looked at more OligoScans than anybody else, how often when a woman reports that constipation, do you see dysfunction in copper, zinc, and boron? Probably often, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
do. I also see low iodine and lower selenium. And yeah, I mean, I'll see copper dysregulation with zinc that's not in balance, which
so
reveals estrogen dominant state or testosterone's low.
Right. And so for practitioners that have an OligoScan, uh, copper accumulation is a function of estrogen dominance.
Yeah.
And so then you go, okay, well, where's that estrogen coming from? Okay, well, it can come from multiple sources. It can come from multiple sources outside of ovarian production. Okay, and so one is aromatase. So every fat cell in the body produces estrogen from testosterone via aromatase enzyme.
Hmm.
Okay. And so the more fat someone has, the more aromatizing will occur.
Yeah.
So that's one source. Another source is basically through deconjugation. So after the liver has essentially conjugated and exported that estrogen into bile, into the small intestine, it can get reabsorbed. It can get deconjugated by specific bacteria in the gut, which will basically they're they're deglucuronidating these
Yeah.
this estrogen, which you can then reabsorb. So gut dysfunction, dysbiosis, is
Right.
another big contributor to this. And so what happens then is you've got this estrogen depressing conversion at the liver, and there's probably also more burden on the liver because there's like elevated LPS, which I talked
Right.
about before, which is furthering burden on the liver. So the liver is sluggish, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's all that means
Right.
is it's got a low rate of ATP production, doesn't have energy to
Right.
do all its tasks. So it is not converting the thyroid hormone as much. And that lowered thyroid hormone is essentially what regulates motility in the gut.
Wow. Yeah. Dude, our society's completely backwards. Telling people to fast in the morning, telling people to give up carbohydrates. Uh,
Yeah.
Not to mention, like, I mean, we wouldn't even have to be having this conversation and doing everything if people weren't, slaving away 8 to 6 under fluorescent lights, not moving. I mean, it really breaks down to like movement, sun exposure, eating processed junk, and then you just compound that over time, and like people wonder why they have all these issues.
Yeah, and these can also be, and these are also passed down.
Yeah,
So the more hypothyroid a woman is when she's carrying a baby, and that's basically the baby is dependent on the mother's thyroid production until it has a thyroid
right.
to make its own. And so this can be passed down. So you can have multiple generations. That's how we get this population long scale effect
Yeah,
of metabolic decrease. So, um, yeah, so I think that answered your question
yeah,
about,
yeah, yeah. Okay, one other thing I wanted to just touch on. What about the person with like crazy high blood sugar? What could be a root cause of that?
yeah, well, a
Like
couple things.
pre-diabetic.
Yeah, so we talked about the Randall cycle effects. So that would be the first thing I would do is try to audit what they're eating with chronometer.
Yeah,
Sometimes I have to go through it with a patient or a practitioner. It's
yeah,
like we need to log 2 days of normal eating here and then we can look at what the total fat in the total carbohydrate is.
Yeah.
Okay. So if someone's eating like 40% of both for their total calories and 20% protein, and they have this problem, that's the first thing I'm going to do is
Yeah.
lower the fat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But elevated stress hormones will do it also.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if someone is eating high fat and they're under blue light constantly,
Yeah.
they're not getting any sun, they are burning the candle at both ends with tasking all day long.
Yeah.
This happens a lot. Unfortunately, it's just a function of society. But a woman entering the workforce too soon after having a kid,
Yeah.
that is extremely stressful. Pregnancy is a big deal. It's like a
Yeah.
very big deal for the body. And that needs, like, you kind of need to remediate from that. It's like
Yeah.
got to be high dense nutrition all through the process and afterward, lots of sleep, lots of sun, that kind of thing. But yeah, so that would be the first thing. I'd look at the fat content.
Okay.
I would look at stress hormones, and then this is where a OligoScan is just phenomenal. Is like
Yeah.
you can look at the micronutrient deficiencies.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll see very low chromium, which
Yeah.
is necessary for insulin sensitivity. You can see low selenium. You
Zinc.
can
Yeah.
right?
Zinc.
All these things, right? So, yeah, so the Ligo scan, like when you introduced me to it, I was like, oh my God, this is like the missing piece here
Yeah.
because one, now you got a really good profiling
Yeah.
of mineral and most vitamins. And also, you can see what's interfering with
Yeah.
that mineral absorption. Like, even if someone is eating the right amounts according to chronometer, they may not be able to absorb them. There may
Right.
be competition occurring at the enzyme level or at the cellular level for those minerals because of elevated metals. And that's like what got us into making aluminum export is this high competition between aluminum and magnesium binding to ATP. And so
Yeah.
most people don't know that aluminum binds 1,000 times stronger to ATP than magnesium does. And magnesium is required to activate that ATP so the cells can use it.
Yep.
So you could be making enough ATP, but you're not activating it because of this competition with aluminum. And as you know, no one is in the normal range for aluminum.
Yeah.
No one. And
Yeah.
so there is serious competition. So here's another sort of metabolic depressor, if you will, that's happening in the environment that we can't control. To some extent, we can control that aluminum input, but the stuff that's in the air, we can't.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's having such a massive effect. I mean, people think that they're living this clean life, and and some people are, but people like us that work really hard at it, it's like you're still breathing in the aluminum from the chemtrails. So it's tough. That's just why sweating and making sure you're getting the mineral synergist is so important. Okay, so I think now would be a good time to kind of go through a case study, because I really, before I met you, I was just really focusing on the OligoScan. Obviously, I have a lot of experience with it. It shines light into what is getting absorbed or what is being lost to the peripheral. But I'm always about collaboration over competition, and you've really introduced me to this concept that like we can use blood work with the OligoScan to really highlight why something is not getting absorbed or what other factors are involved in these systems and functions and making sense of it all. And that's what people want. They want to make sense of it all. And that's why you can't just look at an oligo scan and understand the why. I mean, you can definitely investigate it more, but I really like your approach of using both in combination with one another. So let's go through this case study.
Yeah, sure.
And once I finally get to getting my own blood work done, we'll do another one of these and we'll go over mine. Um,
Awesome.
I'm probably not the best example of this because knock on wood, I don't have too many things going on, but you never know. I want to make it relatable to people. Okay, let's do it.
Are you seeing this?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it filling the screen properly?
Yep.
Okay. So, this was a recent case that I worked on, and for people, I do one-on-ones with clients that come to me directly. I also work with clinics that will refer cases to me, either a single case or a group of cases, and so my preference is to use kind of a basic intake with asking them about bioenergetic cues. Some of those questions we talked about with regard to the gut, but others are like temperature, um, the, learning about their sleep wake cycles, how long they sleep, if they wake up, when they wake up, that kind of thing. These
Mhm.
are all signals of what's happening in response to someone's environment. And so this is somebody that I worked with recently, male 60, metabolic syndrome, hypothyroid, hypogonadal, has struggled with weight
Mhm.
and yo-yo dieted many times over the last 5, 8 years, has been on and off testosterone and thyroid therapy, and it initially came to me because of a presentation I gave on aluminum export and talking about aluminum interference with ATP, and then it just sort of escalated from there. And so, anyway, we went into here is so I was like, okay, go get a DEXA scan because we want to know what your fat mass is here. And so this person's at 40%, 41%, you can see,
Yep.
and a substantial amount of visceral fat.
Yeah.
Okay. And so visceral fat's pretty highly correlated with fatty liver as well. And
Mhm.
so we've got some stuff to work on. And so when I look at the blood work, I usually have like about 25 markers that I like to order initially,
Yeah.
and it's very detailed, and so part of what I'm doing is corroborating what I'm seeing in the OligoScan against these blood markers, and there's a lot of corroboration here. And so that's mostly what I wanted to show you.
Yeah.
But what I'm looking at in a CBC is basically like someone's iron status and how they're handling iron. This is where iron predominantly lives, is in hemoglobin. It's about 70% of all the iron, so it's a better marker
Yeah.
than I think the OligoScan is. But
Totally.
I should say it's a more sensitive marker.
Yeah.
Okay, so you will see very small shifts in iron on the OligoScan, and they will represent very big shifts in iron studies.
Yeah.
So looking at hemoglobin, looking at hematocrit, looking at serum iron, transferrin saturation, which are further down. So, and ferritin.
Yeah.
Um, Also looking at basic metabolic markers, so fasting glucose. So what I want to point out here is the last time this person was tested, which was in January. You'll see those all here on the right.
Hmm.
So fasting glucose, about the same. It's in an optimal range. I like to see it personally between 70 and 90, or 75 and 90.
Okay.
I look at carbon dioxide. It's a little bit low here. So
Uh-huh.
carbon dioxide is essentially going to determine, this is partially coming from mitochondrial production of carbon dioxide during the Krebs cycle.
Right.
Okay. So this is a very important thing, and it does determine acid-base balance. And I'm looking at liver markers, and in this case, this person has some elevated liver markers.
Yeah.
Even their ALT, which is not, out of range in a lab course chart, is still high for my standards. So something is happening in the liver
Yep.
here. I'm going to bypass this lipid panel, but am going to look at triglycerides definitely and see where that is. I like to see that below 100.
Uh-huh.
And then here are the iron markers. And so this TSAT, this iron saturation, is high for my liking. You can see
Yeah.
that it went up. Um, Generally speaking, testosterone replacement therapy will jack up or cause the body to retain more iron,
Yeah.
just like estrogen will cause the body to retain more copper.
Right.
And so both of those things are in a relationship, because the bound, so the bound forms are you want those minerals to be bound to proteins in the body. And it is ceruloplasmin, which is the bound form of copper, which is essentially regulating the flow of copper between its two oxidation states. So it can be used in hemoglobin and then dissolved by macrophages and recycled again. So if ceruloplasmin is not optimal, then someone, particularly men and postmenopausal women, but particularly men, will have a problem with iron overload, even if they're not, even if they don't have hemochromatosis. But women will also be affected with this with regard to anemia. And this is why kind of liver is the, the panacea for anemia, because it has a lot of copper in it with heme iron.
Right.
So you're getting kind of the best of both worlds by eating liver as a result.
Yep.
Um, Scroll down a little bit more here. Okay, so you can see before he was 489, that was while he was on TRT. Okay,
Wow.
now he's at 104.
Oh, he's off TRT now.
Yeah, he's off
Okay.
TRT now. And here's the free T 7.5 down to 1. So that makes sense. Okay. And if you are, this process is uh, the speed at which the body is going to return or normalize to its like optimal state. It takes a while because this person, unwittingly beat themselves up over a course of 10 years,
Right.
maybe even longer. Um, and so the last expression of proper metabolic rate will be the sex hormones. That's not the first thing you're going to see change. That'll be like the last thing that you see change, along with consistent body fat lowering.
Interesting.
And
Because the body wants to preserve that.
well, yeah, it's going to, like, as metabolism ramps up and as ATP production ramps up, that ATP is going to be triaged to the places that need to be regenerated, need energy first. And so, if an organism is under stress for a long period of time, they're going to downregulate the processes that are not essential to
Yeah.
survival,
Right.
right? And so the least essential thing for survival is sex hormones, reproduction. And so that will be also the last thing that gets upregulated whenever you restore this. So I think that's a 6 to 12 month process,
Yeah.
to do this without using hormones.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right. What else do I want to show you here? So let me see. What I want to show you, which is really remarkable for anybody who is questioning this model of the Randall cycle and low fat, high carb. So you could call that high carb. It's not, high carb in my book. I'm looking for insulin here. No.
Maybe all the way down. Yeah, right
It's
there.
okay. This is him 10.1, which is technically insulin resistance,
Yep.
eating low carb, high fat. And so that means probably 50 to 70 grams of carbohydrate and about 200 to 250 grams of fat.
Wow. Yeah.
He's at 6 a couple of months later, eating 200 grams of carbohydrate and 50 grams of fat.
Wow.
That's almost ideal range, which would be 2 to 5.
2 to 5.
Okay.
Okay.
So the fasting glucose is essentially the same. The fasting insulin has remarkably improved, and his A1C is trending in the right direction. It's
Yeah.
lowering. So he's in the pre-diabetic range at 5.6. Now he's right at the cusp at 5.7. He's in pre-diabetic. He's at 5.6 now. That's going to continue to go down
Yeah.
as he moves forward in time with this process. So those were like really key markers that I was looking at to see, is this working, right? Is
Yeah.
this macronutrient change working for him? And it definitely is. And then the other thing I wanted to show you was total estrogen. So
Wow.
yours is estrogen. Now, this is not estradiol, which is what I normally order. So he had someone order this for him, and they didn't order what I was looking for. Total estrogen is the combination of all three
Uh,
estrogens. Estradiol is the most potent one that has the most anti-metabolic effects, the most anti-thyroid effects.
right.
And so it dramatically decreased. That makes sense because he stopped taking testosterone.
Right.
And um, and so what inevitably happens if you don't solve the aromatization problem before you add testosterone, you're going to aromatize a lot of that testosterone. So the estrogen will increase. And that's why his estrogen was so high. Um, but it's at 96 right now, and that's better, significantly better. But ideal would be like 24 to 30 for a man of this age.
Yeah.
And the other thing that so just keep that in mind, that
Yeah.
number 96. And then I wanted to show you ceruloplasmin and ferritin are high. Okay. Both of these are acute phase reactants, meaning they will increase in response to inflammation.
Hmm.
So we have now three things that are pointing to some kind of inflammation in the liver. We've got elevated liver enzymes, we've got elevated ceruloplasmin, and we've got elevated ferritin. Now, this is not ferritin is not elevated according to LabCorp's range, but I like to see it between 50 and 100.
Yeah.
And so this is something that will increase with somebody who is taking testosterone. Now you can see that's not the case for him, but generally speaking, it does.
Yep.
So, my first recommendation for him is go do some blood donation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got to lower the iron levels. And so next I want to kind of scroll down to his OligoScan.
OligoScan. Wow, dude.
Okay. So when we are, so let's like, you're doing this already, but I don't know how many practitioners are doing this with OligoScan. So we can look at magnesium and phosphorus as proxies for ATP, because what is ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. It's made out of phosphorus. Okay. So you can see that it is sort of low in the lowish range here, but it's improving slightly.
Yep.
His magnesium, which is required to activate it, okay,
Yep.
is in the low range also. And it's sort of like they're fluctuating a little bit. So we look at these two, and then we look at the competition, right, which is aluminum. Now, he's been on the two things that he has done since we first met was take aluminum export and change this fat carb balance.
Yeah.
And so here, look at the dramatic decrease in aluminum that he had just
Wow.
over the course
Yeah.
of 2 months. So really dramatic. So
Yep.
far less I mean, this is sort of like almost ideal range right now
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
our society and like what we can expect. But getting below this line into the high minus category for all metals will be significant for allowing mineral metabolism to function normally.
Yep. Yeah.
The
It's a,
other big thing here is you can use copper, zinc, and boron as proxies for sex hormones. Okay.
yep.
And so this is a little bit more complicated. You and I have talked about this for a little while, but there's overt copper toxicity, and this is unbound copper.
Yep.
Okay. But we also know that he has high ceruloplasmin. So this lines up,
Yep.
right? We're seeing elevated ceruloplasmin in the blood. We're seeing estrogen, very high estrogen, right?
Yep.
And we're seeing this elevation of copper in the OligoScan. Now, he is taking a lot. He's taking zinc. He was doing it unwittingly. He was had 4 or 5 different supplements that all had zinc in them
Uh-huh.
and didn't know that they were like combo, like blends. There was like a thyroid blend he was taking, and there's like a testosterone blend that he was taking, and then there was a multi that he was taking. All three of these things had zinc in them, so he was getting a lot of zinc. But we can also assume that he is displacing that zinc,
Yep. Without a
and so
doubt. I mean, there's clear liver congestion, and we saw that in his blood test. It correlates almost perfectly.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then boron is, if you are not supplementing boron, and you've taught me this, is that boron looking like this looks like pressure on the on sex hormone production.
Yep.
So all of these things line up with blood work. Then
Wow.
we are improving insulin, but you can see he's got a pretty significant chromium deficiency
Yeah.
and a pretty significant iodine deficiency,
Yeah.
and selenium is low.
Yep.
And so uh, basically, this is like key for thyroid hormone conversion. So you can see how the micronutrients that are identified in OligoScan are lining up with the blood work, that are lining up with the symptoms, right? And so if we're framing this all around uh, a systems level optimization for optimizing ATP,
Yeah.
then these are all parts of that process.
Yep. Did his thyroid markers get better on the blood test?
I'm not sure that he took them before, but what he did
Oh,
share with me, and I didn't put him in here, was his thyroid, his temperature, his waking temperature increased from 97 to 97.5 over this 2 months.
got it.
So,
Would he be hypothyroid?
yeah, I mean that is technically hypothyroid. So I don't put a lot of weight on the thyroid testing markers, like the blood markers.
Yeah.
Um, I do like one of the things that I wanted to see here by testing TPO and is that he doesn't have Hashimoto's. Okay, so there's no dysfunction. He's not producing antibodies in the thyroid, so that's not a driver for him.
Got it.
Okay, the driver is at the conversion level at the liver,
Yeah.
and so that's improving.
Yeah.
Okay, um, interestingly, a lot of, and you could, love for you to weigh in on this, is I see a lot of like, look at his
Wow.
mercury.
Yeah.
I see a lot of when someone has excess mercury, I see thyroid antibodies in the blood. And the reason that would be is that is a thyroid's natural antagonist, or its natural bonding agent is selenium.
Yep.
And the thyroid is the highest per gram location of selenium in the body.
Yeah. Wow.
It's also the highest per gram location of iodine in the body, which is a secondary binder of mercury. So
Yeah.
mercury will tend to translocate to the thyroid because of this, because of these two minerals being there.
Yeah.
And that's why you also generally see them both low in somebody who has excess mercury.
Yeah. Did he have mercury fillings?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
He had them and then he got them removed after a
Got it.
number of years.
Got it.
So, is still kind of dealing with the fallout.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting. We're still learning this, but you can see every single metal, with the exception of mercury and gadolinium, decreasing by simply taking aluminum export, which is just the minerals that are antagonized by aluminum, right?
Yep.
And he's got a little bit of a mercury dump and he's got a huge gadolinium dump as a
Yeah.
result of that.
Yeah.
And so that will add more pressure to the liver. So you want to definitely support the liver in his case while he's going through that.
Yeah. And I mean, you're always gonna. How long was the comparison between the two Oligo scans? Do you know? Was it like 2 months?
Does it say? It should say
Yeah, I
up
should
there.
say at the top.
Yeah,
Yeah, go down.
here.
521. Okay, so yeah, like 2 months. A little more than 2 months. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, Elizabeth Hutchess would say that it's the silica, particularly, because look how that silica improved incredibly.
Right. This is dramatic, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's dramatic. Yeah, that's probably one of the better examples I have or that you have. But yeah, she would say that when you start giving the body the silica and the boron, all the other minerals are gonna improve. But in this case, these metals are gonna start, coming out of the body. And yeah, it's always like anytime you have a case like this where there's a lot of imbalance, it's gonna take time, but it looks like it's a great start just after 2 months. Yeah, awesome, dude. This was great. This hopefully should really help people. Connect the dots and verify that like using blood and a legal scan together can really help paint a better picture of what's actually going on. Okay, I want to ask a couple more things here for you. Dude, one of the things that I've taken away the most since meeting you is vitamin B1 and thiamine. And for me, sulfur has always been my problem mineral. I've always had the hardest time getting my sulfur high, which we know sulfur is a proxy for glutathione. I just tested myself before we got on this, and I was at the Eco Show with you. I was traveling for 8 days, was not eating great. Scanned myself when I got back, sulfur was low. Been taking pretty big doses of benfotiamine, TTFD. 8 days later, scanned myself again, sulfur jumped up again. So now this is my second example of where I've got my baseline, no TTFD, no benfo B1, done 2 weeks high dosing it, testing, saw the increase, didn't take it for 2 weeks, saw it go down, took it for 8 days, saw it go up. So I'm convinced that it works. But why don't you help explain why people have B1 deficiency, what it does, and how it does play a role with sulfur?
Yeah, B1 is really important in bioenergetics because it acts directly on the pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme. So this is the last step in glycolysis. So once glucose gets into the cell, it's going to go through a number of metabolic steps and until it ends at PDH, okay? And if there is enough B1 present in the active form, which is TPP, so it needs to be converted from the supplemental form or from the food form, that will become acetyl-CoA and go into the Krebs cycle inside the mitochondria and continue down the chain to becoming ATP. If there's not enough active B1 present, then that original glucose will get shunted and push on LDH to become lactate or lactic acid. And so in bioenergetics, adding thiamine, particularly in the form of benfo or TTFD, which are far more absorbable than thiamine HCl. So those are the three main
Yeah.
forms. And thiamine HCl is just very poorly absorbed. So you have to take very large gram level doses of it
Yeah.
in order to get that effect. Now, PDH is in every single cell, okay? So this has system-wide effects. People that take benfo or TTFD, and this is not the case for you because you don't have this dysfunction, but they will see dramatic improvements in gut function because all of those cells that are in the gut lining are dependent on energy
Yeah.
to maintain tight junctions. Okay, so a lot of people just think, well, glyphosate is what's causing the split in tight junctions. Yeah, but if the cell has enough energy to regenerate, then it can maintain tight junctions.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and so you'll see big improvements in motility as a result of taking one of these highly absorbable forms. You will see SIBO resolve because motility increases. So one of the primary ways to get the bacteria back down to the colon where it should be living is the actual motility of the gut. And there is the the bowel movement effect, which is mechanically pushing this bacteria back down to the colon. But there's also the migrating motor complex, which that's its entire purpose
Yeah.
is to activate and squeeze basically from the top of the small intestine all the way back down to the colon. And that happens in the absence of eating. So that happens in after an hour and a half or so of not eating. So
Yeah.
you really want to, this is why you want to be eating like 3 squares so that there's 3 hours or 4 hours between each meal so that migrating motor complex can activate and push that bacteria down. So I've seen SIBO resolve from taking this. There are central nervous system effects. So improved cognition, improved memory, improved executive function as a result of taking this because all the neurons in the brain are dependent on PDH supplying that acetyl-CoA into the Krebs cycle. So for somebody who has any kind of neurological disorder or any kind of gut dysfunction, these are very, very important. But in your case, the reason why you would see an increase in sulfur is because these are the thiamine is in a sulfur-based molecule.
Yeah.
So it's actually donating sulfur to the body. And the TTFD form has about twice the amount of sulfur in it that bemfo does. And this, when you're deciding which form to give to somebody, this is where the OligoScan becomes really critical, because you want to look at all of the markers that are involved in sulfur metabolism. So you want to look at sulfur status, selenium status, molybdenum status. You want to look at what pressure there is from metals. So, the metals that are predominantly cleared by glutathione. So you want to look at how these are all working, because you want to know people can have, quote, they call Derek Lonsdale and now Elliot Overton talks about paradoxical responses, basically Herx reactions
Right.
to taking this. And the people that Herx are the ones that have low glutathione status. They Herx by taking TTFD. Why? Because glutathione is required to essentially break open that molecule
Yeah.
to free the thiamine. So you need to have good glutathione status in order to use that TTFD, or that paradoxical effect can happen. And you can easily see how someone's going to respond by just looking at their OligoScan markers. Now,
So, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. So bentho has about half the amount of sulfur that TTFD does, even though you need to take 3 times the amount to get roughly equivalent dose. So a standard dose, like a moderate standard dose of TTFD, would be about 100 milligrams. A standard dose for bemfo would be 300 milligrams or so, 3 to 500. Those are sort of equivalent doses in terms of absorbing the amount of thiamine that you would need, but the sulfur dose is not the same. So you would be getting a lot more sulfur from the TTFD. And so that will help a person determine, if you're a practitioner going, oh, this could really help my patient. You look at their OligoScan status. If their glutathione proxies are not optimal, then start with the bemfo, and that's usually how people get eventually trending into TTFD use. And they do have a little bit of a different. It's not black and white, but TTFD does sort of have a preference for the central nervous system in the brain, and bemfo have a preference for the peripheral nervous system, the peripheral neurons.
Got it. And for everybody listening too, like the way I do it is I buy these things called bladed papes. They're basically like squares of cellulose, and I'll buy TTFD and Benfo from, bulk supplement company, and then I'll basically just put them in the bladed papes, and then I fold it up, and then I run it under my faucet, and it basically like creates this little capsule, and then I just basically chase it with water, and that's how I've been taking mine. But it is amazing. So basically, it's helping us. It's basically helping us use energy better,
Yeah,
convert
exactly.
food energy from food better.
Yeah, exactly. It's specifically glucose.
Yeah,
Okay.
specifically.
And so like for somebody who this is an intervention that I almost always throw in if I see somebody who has like overt, even if they don't test their blood,
Yeah,
and we can't look at fasting glucose, fasting insulin, triglycerides, A1C. We can't see those markers. If they've got other overt symptoms, they're overweight. There's a number of things, but like that's I just throw bemfo in. It's safe. Almost always, if I'm with somebody, they're gonna get an OligoScan,
yeah.
and so that's like I'll be able to see. Oh, you're gonna be fine with TTFD, so we'll just throw that in instead. But yeah, you're removing a major bottleneck in glucose oxidation by supporting PDH.
Got it. And what's the root cause as to why do most people have low B1 to begin with? Like,
Derek Lonsdale's, who is sort of the OG, it's funny. Like I always tell the story when we're at a trade show, because like I brought it up at A4M when I was hanging out with you and your dad was there. He's like, oh yeah, I knew Derek Lonsdale when he imported the first TTFD from Japan, where they created it. So I'm assuming most practitioners are aware that thiamine deficiency was identified in Japan. They called it beriberi disease. And where they saw it happen was in the aristocracy that was eating white rice, because the thiamine is in the hull of the grain. So the peasants were eating whole grain rice, and the aristocracy was eating white rice. They were developing beriberi. They eventually figured out that this was because of thiamine, and they created this synthetic form that's sulfur-based called TTFD. And um, and so uh, Derek Lonsdale, I've lost my train of thought here, but what
Do
was
you
your question?
think most
Oh,
people are deficient in it?
yeah, I do. I think we have, and this was his claim in his
Yeah.
book, is like his classic book on the matter, is that we have low grade thiamine deficiency.
Yeah.
Most people are not eating the whole grain.
Yeah, most
And
people are avoiding grain now because of the glyphosate.
yes, they're avoiding the grain altogether. And if they do eat it, they're eating the refined grain.
Yeah.
And so then you go like, now personally, like don't notice a big I
Different.
don't notice a really any effect by taking TTFD or Benfo personally.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but if I look at all my metabolic markers, they're optimal. So I don't have a deficiency of this. If I did, I would see that show up in these metabolic markers, and I would definitely feel it.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know. There's got to be another variable in here that would be causing this outside of diet. And so that's an interesting thing to explore, because I'm an example. I don't eat whole grains,
Yeah.
right? But I don't have a thiamine deficiency.
And you told me that like uh chronic use of nicotine and like overall like stress in general is going to deplete B1 or
Yeah, well,
require
so
need.
yeah, so nicotine alters B1 metabolism. So it can sort of sequester B1, so it can't be used at PDH.
Got
So
it.
if you are a chronic nicotine user, post-COVID, a lot of people would just start taking nicotine, whether they be patches or lozenges or
Yeah.
pouches, as protection against spike protein adhesion to ACE2. So, if you have been doing that, you're probably still doing that because, nicotine is not an easy thing to drop once you get started.
Yeah.
And you like the effect too.
Yeah.
So, taking a B1 supplement would be beneficial.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Before we wrap up, I've got one more topic I just want to get your opinion on. So we talked a lot about the liver. We talked a lot well, we went through the case study and I highlighted the high ceruloplasmin and the high liver enzyme or the high liver. Um, Talk to me about like root cause protocol. I know you've had Morley Robbins on your show. Like I read his book and honestly, like I agreed with a lot of it, but where does it fall short and kind of where do you stand on it? Where do you think that what do you think's missing from it? What do you think's incorrect?
Yeah, so a number of the premises are solid, and his premise of iron overload being very, very oxidative via Fenton reactions is solid.
Yeah.
I could say in consulting with on a few cases of neurological disease, particularly Parkinson's, uh, iron overload, iron tissue, iron in the substantia nigra is very well documented. It's probably the most documented metal um, associated with neurological disease. Now, it doesn't mean that um, it is the biggest driver of it. It it just means in the research, there's more articles put out about iron displacement in the brain in particular regions associated with those pathologies than any other metal.
Yeah.
Okay, but aluminum is definitely implicated, mercury is definitely implicated, lead is definitely implicated, and so these Fenton reactions are very, very bad. And so making sure that iron is properly regulated uh, and not being displaced into the tissue, that it's actually bound to the proteins that it should be bound to, that's critical. So he's right on about that.
Yeah.
He's right on about ceruloplasmin's role in the recycling of iron. And
Right.
so if ceruloplasmin is at optimal levels and it's properly loaded with copper, you won't have copper toxicity, okay? And you will have good iron metabolism at the same time. So he's correct about that and solid with all that stuff. Um, I but there are other variables that are involved. There's other metals and minerals that are involved in the same. So, for example, um, metallothionein, which is one of our major detoxification enzymes for metals,
Yeah.
um, he tells people not to supplement with zinc because zinc will upregulate metallothionein,
Right.
and that is true. Uh, and the reason he's saying not to do that is because he doesn't want to basically sequester copper. Now, it has a binding preference, and copper is the number one binding preference of metallothionein.
Right.
But we require metallothionein function to bind cadmium and lead. Okay.
Yep.
And so, as you know, cadmium is very high and ubiquitous in pretty much
Yeah.
every test that you see.
Yeah.
And if you then try to dampen metallothionein, you're going to probably be worse off. I mean, my view, it's going to be a net negative to bottleneck metallothionein. So the only way
Right.
around that is by making sure that your zinc and copper status are good using an OligoScan. You have to look at those three markers.
Yeah.
Also, lead.
You there? Okay, we're back. Sorry. I don't know. I think my Wi-Fi went out.
What was the
Let
last
me
thing you
make
heard?
sure this is can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Give me one second. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right,
Hmm.
sorry about that. I don't know. I think my Wi-Fi went out.
What was the last thing you heard?
Um, zinc that we need making sure that we're getting adequate zinc is important.
Yeah. So zinc, copper, iron, cadmium, and lead are all co-regulated together via metallothionein.
Yeah.
And so it's not directly regulating iron, but because it has highest binding affinity for copper, it is indirectly regulating iron. And so in his view, you don't want to upregulate metallothionein because you will bind the copper, then ceruloplasmin won't work properly, and you'll get iron dysfunction. But you will also then accumulate more cadmium and lead in the tissue, which is not good.
Yeah.
So the only answer I can see is a person needs to know what their statuses are,
Yeah.
and the OligoScan with some of the blood work are critical. Like these, I think when you're looking at iron status and the OligoScan markers, you kind of need to do iron in the blood and then look at the rest of the markers in OligoScan that are in this cluster.
Yeah.
And then if you do supplement zinc because zinc is low, then you need to be monitoring copper status and you need to be again monitoring iron status in the blood. So you're looking at all these things together to make sure that you're not accumulating more cadmium
Yep.
and that you're not burning out your copper at the same time. So you've got cadmium and lead on this side, and you got copper on this side, and you're kind of playing a dance between how metallothionein is binding these two things, and then what's happening to iron over here as a result of that copper binding. So I think that's a big blind spot,
So
and
do you
maybe. Mhm.
are you against zinc supplementation, or do you think for some people that are really low in it, it can actually be beneficial short term? Obviously,
No, I think like it's almost there was this like debate going on X between a bunch of practitioners between do you supplement zinc or not. I don't think that's the question. I think you've got to be taking zinc. Zinc is critically important for so many functions in the body. You got to be taking zinc, whether you are going to do it in the form of oysters or you're going to do it in the form of sucrosomial zinc. You got to be taking zinc. Um, that's if you see it low. I wouldn't just supplement zinc long term if you had good status, but I would be eating oysters, once a week. You know,
Especially if you're a guy who's ejaculating on a daily basis. Like you're losing zinc. So you need to
yeah,
probably get more than a guy who's not.
yes,
Also, if you're cooking your meat like medium well, you're losing a lot of the bioavailable zinc and carnitine.
yeah. Or if you're vegan,
Yeah.
or there's a number of other scenarios where that would be low. So no, I'm not against that, but I do think you do need to monitor copper and as you're supplementing zinc. I don't think you should just take copper.
Yeah.
Eating beef liver is a good counterbalance to eating oysters
Yeah.
because beef liver has a lot more copper in it than it does zinc. Oysters has a lot more zinc in it compared to copper. So you could eat them on different days, and then you're just making sure that you're getting your, food-based multivitamins in the form of beef liver and oysters, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, but there are cases of people that have become copper deficient by overeating oysters.
Yeah. Wow. I believe
And
it.
it's because of the upregulation of metallothionein.
Interesting. Yeah, it's all about balance. You can't be eating a piece of liver every day. It's got to be like multiple times a week, but or maybe a couple times a week. But yeah, that's why the oysters and the liver are such a good one-two punch.
Yeah, it's the one-two punch. I mean, you get a lot there.
So I forgot to ask you this earlier, but this is actually very important. So if you're eating a ribeye, what don't you want to eat with it?
Um, well, the way I look at it is look at what your total fat is in the day. So if you were restricting fat earlier in the day, let's say you did the fruit till noon,
Yeah,
you weren't getting any fat, and your only fat was from that ribeye, you're good.
yeah,
Like let's say this is
yeah,
it's a 150-ounce ribeye.
yeah,
You're not overloading that fat in that day. But
yeah,
if you were eating like a bunch, if you drank like a liter of whole milk earlier in the day, and then you wanted to have ice cream with your ribeye, you're going to be very high fat for that
yeah,
day.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so what I will sometimes do is like, ice cream is a superfood. If you get organic ice
yeah,
cream that's made with like organic cream, egg yolks, sugar, I mean, this like you want to bring someone back from the dead, give them ice cream. It's
yeah,
like
yeah,
so, but I will restrict fat earlier in the day
yeah,
so that I can have ice cream at night. So it's just being mindful of what all these macronutrients are. And once you track enough, like you don't need to track ad infinitum on a chronometer what your macros are. You just need to track enough to know that what you're eating, like you're calibrating. You're
yeah,
calibrating, what chronometer is saying to what you're eating. People do end up eating mostly the same foods every day,
yeah,
and so breakfast and lunch, the easiest way to implement what I'm suggesting is that and lunch are almost identical
yeah,
because one, it's easier, it's more convenient, it's more logistically appropriate for your day. You're kind of
yeah,
eating relatively, you're not going to sit down Italian style and have like a big thing for
yeah,
breakfast and a big thing for lunch. That's what dinner's for.
yeah,
And so you kind of eat the same thing, breakfast and lunch, and dinner can be much more variable and you can eat what everybody else is eating in that social setting. You don't have to like practice any kind of restriction because you were already diligent about breakfast and lunch. So that is I think the most logistically appropriate way to set all this up.
yeah, totally. All right, we're kind of getting close on time here. You offer consultations and you basically can tell us about like how people can work with you, clinics, people in general. You want to pull up
Yeah,
that page?
so for clinics, I do one-on-ones. Sometimes I will do like a package if they've got they just want to hand off some cases to me. And basically what I do in that case is review all of the information that I get sent. If it's just an OligoScan, I can do that with a little bit of intake information, or if it's blood work and an OligoScan or a gut test plus blood work and OligoScan, I'll just basically go through everything and produce a white label report for a practitioner.
Yeah.
with like a 10 to 15-minute video walkthrough of why it's constructed that way. And this again is from an ATP-centric systems-based view of health. And so um, that's essentially the deliverables. And with like a patient or a client that wants to come on, usually I'm doing more for them because the practitioner is doing already a lot for their patient. So I'm gonna start by walking them through how to set up their diet, how to track in chronometer is like a first step, how to like appropriately sync the circadian rhythm to the
Yeah.
natural light cycles and do all that. And then we'll go through a multi-phase process where then we drill down into micronutrient status. We start to look after we get the metabolic rate revved up a little bit, then we'll start looking at detoxification at that point and removing other toxins that may be burdening ATP production. And if gut symptoms and stuff don't resolve just from that, then we will have a specific gut phase that we do after. And so with practitioners, it's basically reproducing a report and mini video walkthrough. I do have practitioners that want to be trained in this method.
Yeah.
And so I have sort of a one-on-one coaching program for that as well. And I'll send you information on that you can post to practitioners if you want.
Yeah, perfect. Please do. For people that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Your website?
Yeah, probably my website. You and I share ionomlabs.com, but my website's jonathanrickert.com, so it's just my name.com. And you'll be able to link that up and they
Yeah.
can, contact me through it. I have about 32 articles on my site right now that are all about this bioenergetics view. I have 16 videos. They're, anywhere between 10 and 30 minutes long discussing all this. It's all cited and all sourced with PubMed IDs that you can look up for yourself if you want to do more background and learn more about this stuff.
Dude, I've watched them and your articles are amazing. And you've got some really good guests on your podcast. So, yeah, kudos to you, dude. Your website's a wealth of knowledge. And yeah, I think a lot of people really want the one-on-one support. People want to learn this stuff, but not everybody has the time to do so. So, I think you really offer an amazing solution to really help people get to the root cause and why some of these different systems aren't working properly. But hopefully they learned a lot from today. I think this was great, dude. Um, I loved going through the case study, and I loved diving into some of these bigger topics that are affecting a lot of people. Anything else you want to tell my audience?
N- Uh, if you haven't had, if you're not a practitioner and you haven't had an OligoScan, get one. You like, I think everyone needs a baseline. I used to do hair before using the OligoScan, and it's it's very limited what you can see with hair, and and cumbersome. So
Yeah,
as you often say, hair is an excretion pathway. And one of the things that I've learned as we've developed our product is, yeah, you can see what's excreting in hair, but you could be redistributing metals to soft tissue. You cannot see that with hair.
yeah, yep,
You can see that with an OligoScan. So if you're going to do any kind of detox intervention, using an OligoScan is going to be much better because you can see both things. You can see what's being eliminated and what's being redistributed. And so it's become my favorite tool. If you haven't had one, go get one. Find your local practitioner through your site, through Jeff's website.
yeah. And thanks for that. And yeah, it's been great working with you, man. It's really been fun trying to both come together and put our heads together and try to solve these bigger issue problems. And when we started Inom Labs, like we came to the agreement that like it's the purist meets the realist. So we're not trying to replace things that people shouldn't replace, like whole milk and liver and good quality meat. But the minerals that people have a hard time getting from the modern day food supply, you got to get them somehow. So it's been awesome work with you, bro. This was great. We'll do another one of these after I do my own blood work, and then maybe we'll go over it. And yeah, hopefully we'll have some more announcements soon about future products and ways that we're helping bridge the gap.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff. Appreciate you.
Yeah, bro. All right. Take care.